You descend a narrow staircase beneath the palace. The air grows colder with each step, thick with centuries of silence. Your torch flickers against wet stone walls, and then you see it. Scratched into the rock with desperate fingernails, dozens of crosses, some barely visible, others carved so deep they bled. Beside them, words in Latin that make your blood stop. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in darkness. These marks weren't made by prisoners of war or common criminals. They were made by women whose only crime was refusing to forget who they were. His is the story of what happened when the Ottoman Empire decided that faith could be erased, and the nuns who proved them wrong. Before we go deeper into this buried chapter, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? It's incredible how a story hidden beneath Istanbul for centuries can reach someone on the other side of the planet today. The year is 1458. The Byzantine Empire has fallen. Mehmed II, barely 30 years old, controls an empire stretching from the Danube to the Aegean. His armies don't just conquer territory. They reorganize reality itself. Churches become mosques. Icons turn to ash. And the people who served those churches? They become a problem requiring Ottoman efficiency. In the months following Constantinople's fall, monasteries across Greece and the Balkans receive no warning. Just the sound of hooves at dawn, the smell of smoke by noon. The empire's strategy isn't random violence, it's systematic transformation. Historical records from the Ottoman archives, preserved in the Topkapi collections, reveal a bureaucratic machine designed to convert, relocate, or eliminate religious communities that refused integration. The word used in official documents is sürgün, forced resettlement. But for the women in remote convents, it meant something darker, complete erasure from the historical record. In a monastery outside Thessaloniki, Abbess Selene kneels before the altar at dawn. She's 43, though her face carries the weight of someone much older. For 2 decades, she's led this community of 37 women, some widows seeking peace, others girls sent by families who couldn't afford dowries. They grow olives, copy manuscripts, pray 7 times daily. Their life is routine, predictable, invisible to empires. Until it isn't. A messenger arrives before sunrise, a Greek merchant who'd bribed his way through Ottoman checkpoints. His message is 3 words. They're coming today. Selene doesn't ask who. She already knows. She's heard what happened to the monastery at Meteora, how the soldiers gave the nuns 1 hour to convert, and when they refused, marched them into the hills where winter did the empire's work. She's heard about the convent in Corinth, where the women were given Turkish names and distributed to households as servants, their baptismal records burned. Selene gathers her sisters in the chapel. She doesn't lie to them. "We have 2 choices," she says, voice steady. "We can run into the mountains and die of cold and hunger within a week, or we can stay, keep our faith, and see what God preserves." Sister Magdalena, just 19, asks the question everyone's thinking. What if they kill us? Selene looks at the crucifix above the altar, Byzantine silver that's hung there for 300 years. "Then we'll die as we lived, but I don't think they'll kill us. Corpses have no value to an empire. They'll try something worse. They'll try to make us forget." The soldiers arrive at midday. No cannons, no fire. The competitor script dramatizes this with Hollywood theatrics, but Ottoman military records show a different reality. These weren't chaotic raids. They were administrative operations. 40 cavalry, 2 scribes, 1 imam. The captain reads from a scroll in Turkish, then Greek. The monastery is now property of the Sultan. Its inhabitants are subjects requiring rehabilitation into the Dar al-Islam. The nuns have 1 week to prepare for relocation to Constantinople. Resistance will be interpreted as rebellion against the Sultan's mercy. That word, mercy, sits in the air like poison. Selene responds in flawless Greek, knowing the captain understands. We are grateful for the Sultan's generosity. We will prepare. The officer seems almost disappointed. He'd expected tears, perhaps defiance he could punish. Instead, he gets bureaucratic compliance from a middle-aged woman who won't give him the satisfaction of fear. For 7 days, the nuns prepare, but not in the way the empire expects. They don't pack belongings, they hide testimony. Magdalena, who learned to read and write from her scholar father before he died, begins copying their names into a small prayer book, along with their villages of origin, their baptismal dates. She writes in Latin and conceals it in the lining of her sleeve. Sister Thecla, the eldest at 67, teaches the younger women a song, a Greek hymn so old it predates Christianity, adapted centuries ago with Christian words. "If they take our language," Thecla whispers, "sing this. The melody will remember what words forget." The march to the sea takes 11 days. The empire provides minimal provisions, enough to keep them alive, not comfortable. At night, they're locked in village barns or caravanserais. Ottoman records note the transport of 37 female religious dissidents without elaboration. But a Greek Orthodox priest in a village near Kavala kept a diary, now preserved in Athens. He wrote, "They passed through today, the nuns from Thessaloniki. Soldiers wouldn't let us speak to them, but as they walked, they sang. I didn't recognize the hymn, but I recognized the defiance in it. May God preserve them, for man will not." The ship is a merchant galley converted for transport. Below deck, the nuns are chained not like slaves but like inventory, roped together at the wrist, given barely enough room to sit. The voyage across the Marmara Sea takes 4 days. When they arrive at Constantinople, the city that was Byzantium, they're marched through streets where Greek is still spoken in whispers, past the Hagia Sophia, now crowned with minarets, past markets selling icons as curiosities to European travelers. They're brought to the Topkapi Palace complex, but not to the visible palace. To the sections below it, the administrative bowels where the empire processes its human problems. Here's where the Ottoman system reveals its sophistication. The women aren't thrown into dungeons. They're given a room with windows, decent food, even access to a courtyard twice daily. A scholar imam named Mehmed Effendi visits them 3 times a week for theological dialogue. He's educated, speaks some Greek, and presents conversion not as betrayal, but as fulfillment of Abraham's promise. The empire doesn't want broken martyrs. It wants willing subjects who will validate Ottoman tolerance. For 2 months, the nuns listen politely. Celine even engages Mehmed in debate about the nature of the Trinity. He leaves frustrated but impressed, noting in his report, "Their abbess possesses a philosophical mind. She could be valuable if turned." But they don't turn. As weeks become months, the empire's patience thins. The quality of food declines. The courtyard privileges disappear. The theological visits stop. The nuns are relocated to a lower level of the palace substructure, rooms that were storage chambers during Byzantine times, now repurposed as holding cells for problematic subjects awaiting administrative resolution. The official records, discovered by Turkish historian Halil İnalcık in the 1960s, refer to them only as İnatçı Rahibeler, the stubborn nuns. 37 names that appear in one ledger, then vanish from all subsequent documentation. What happened in those underground rooms? For 5 centuries, no one knew. Then in 2008, during foundation work for a museum expansion at Topkapi, construction workers broke through a wall that shouldn't have been there. Behind it, a chamber roughly 12 feet square. The air was stale, untouched since the stone was sealed. On the walls, hundreds of small crosses scratched into the limestone. Latin phrases, Greek prayers, and in the corner, barely visible, names carved with what must have been ceramic shards or fingernails. Celine, Magdalena, Thecla. 37 names total, matching the number from the Ottoman ledger. Dr. Elif Kaya, the archaeologist who led the investigation, described what else they found. The crosses weren't random. They followed the liturgical calendar. We could trace the progression of feast days by their arrangement. These women maintained their religious observance in complete darkness, marking time by memory and faith alone. We found evidence of oil lamps, but only in the earliest layer. Later, they lived without light. Here's what the evidence suggests. The Ottoman authorities, unable to convert them and unwilling to create martyrs that might inspire resistance, chose a third option: bureaucratic erasure. The nuns were sealed in a chamber beneath the palace with minimal provisions, left to die not by execution but by neglect. The empire's logic was coldly efficient. If they eventually converted from desperation, they'd be released. If they died, they'd disappear from history without the propaganda problem of public persecution. A 1462 court record mentions an inquiry about the disposition of the Greek religious women, to which the Grand Vizier responded, "The matter has been resolved administratively. No further documentation is required." But those scratches on the wall tell a different story, one of how long they survived down there. By counting the feast day markers, archaeologists estimated they lived in that sealed chamber for at least 18 months. How? A cistern access point in the floor provided water. The initial provisions would have lasted weeks, maybe 2 months if rationed severely. After that, the only explanation is that someone from the palace staff, perhaps a Christian servant or a sympathetic guard, secretly provided minimal food through a gap in the stones, enough to sustain life but not enough to leave evidence. Magdalena's handwriting appears repeatedly on the walls. She scratched out psalms in Latin, Greek, even Armenian, as if trying every language she knew to send a message through stone and time. One phrase, carved larger than the rest, "Non nobis, Domine," "Not unto us, O Lord." It's from Psalm 115, a prayer of humility and perseverance. Beside it, she carved something else. "We sang today though our throats bled. They will not have our silence." The singing is what haunts researchers most. In that sealed chamber, without light, slowly starving, the women maintained their liturgical practices. They sang the hours, matins, lauds, vespers, marking time by prayer when the sun couldn't reach them. Ottoman records from that period mention complaints from palace guards about unnatural sounds coming from beneath the royal kitchens. One report, dated March 1463, notes, "The foreign women's wailing continues. It disturbs the night watch. Request permission to flood the lower chambers." The request was denied, not from mercy but because the cisterns fed the palace's water supply. What did it sound like? That singing in the dark? Sister Thekla's ancient hymn, passed through cracked lips. Celine's steady voice leading even when she could barely speak. Magdalena, the youngest, whose voice probably broke from thirst and hunger but who kept singing because silence would mean surrender. They sang not for rescue. They knew none was coming, but because singing proved they were still human, still faithful, still present in a world trying to erase them. The physical evidence shows what happened to their bodies. Bone fragments discovered in the chamber revealed severe malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies consistent with prolonged darkness, evidence of disease. But there's something else that puzzles medical examiners. None of the bones show signs of violence against each other. In situations of extreme starvation, groups often turn violent. But these women died beside each other, apparently peacefully. Dr. Kaya noted, their remains were found in a rough circle, facing inward, as if they'd gathered for one final prayer and never separated. The last inscription, carved near the door at ground level where someone standing could reach it. Lux in tenebris lucet, et tenebrae eam non comprehenderunt. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. It's from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 5. Below it, a date, 1464. If that date is accurate, it means someone in that chamber remained alive and capable of carving stone nearly 3 years after their imprisonment began. Then, nothing. The Ottoman records never mention them again. The chamber was eventually sealed so thoroughly that it disappeared from palace maps. The empire moved on to other conquests, other administrative problems. The world forgot there had ever been 37 nuns from Thessaloniki who chose faith over survival. But here's what the empire couldn't erase: the power of physical testimony. Those scratches in stone became witnesses when human voices couldn't be. When Magdalena carved her name into the wall, she was committing an act of defiant hope that someday someone would break through that darkness and read her testimony. She was right. 5 centuries later, her handwriting was photographed, analyzed, translated. Her voice, silenced by the Ottoman Empire in 1464, spoke again in 2008. The discovery created theological and political tensions. Turkish officials initially downplayed the find, concerned about implications for Ottoman historical legacy. Greek Orthodox leaders called for the chamber to be consecrated as a memorial. Academic debates erupted about interpretation. Were the women martyrs, victims, or simply casualties of imperial transition? But perhaps those categories miss the point. They were human beings who, when stripped of everything, freedom, light, food, hope of rescue, chose to maintain their identity through the only means left: memory, song, and scratches in stone. Today, the chamber remains closed to the public, accessible only to researchers. But the Turkish government approved an unusual compromise. A small plaque was installed in the Topkapi Palace gardens above where the chamber lies. It reads in Turkish, Greek, and English, "Below this ground, witnesses to faith endured. May their memory teach us the cost of conviction." It's intentionally vague, avoiding details that might inflame religious tensions. But visitors who know the story bring flowers anyway, leaving them beside the plaque. The flowers wilt quickly in Istanbul's heat, but every day new ones appear. There's a strange echo to consider. The Ottoman Empire, which tried to erase these women through bureaucratic silence, is now itself mostly erased. Dissolved in 1922, its territories divided, its archives scattered across continents. But those crosses scratched by fingernails remain. The names carved in darkness are still readable. Power, for all its monuments and records, proved more fragile than the desperate testimony of powerless women scratching stone. On certain nights, palace security guards report something they won't officially document. A sound, barely audible, like singing in a language they don't recognize, rising from somewhere beneath the gardens. It's probably wind moving through ancient cisterns, acoustic tricks played by architecture and imagination. Probably. But the guards, Turkish Muslims with no religious investment in the story, sometimes cross themselves anyway, because some things, once witnessed, even centuries later, demand acknowledgement. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness, despite centuries of trying, could not overcome it. Not the darkness of that sealed chamber, not the darkness of bureaucratic erasure, not even the darkness of 500 years of forgetting. 37 women sang until their voices failed, carved until their fingers bled, believed until their bodies surrendered. The empire took everything from them except the one thing that mattered most: the ability to leave a mark that would outlast empires. And now you know their names. Now you've heard their story. The silence has been broken, and broken permanently. That, perhaps, is the only victory that matters. The one that comes not from power, but from the stubborn refusal to be forgotten.